Welcome. Today, we'll be discussing some of the things that you gotta think about and consider when you're getting into the hobby. One of the things that you need to consider is space and layout size. So, are you gonna do switching? You're gonna do a loop? And that does play a key factor. So, if you don't have a whole lot of space, you can't have either you're gonna do switching with large locomotives or you're gonna need a smaller scale. Because I believe like 1/80th in scale. And it does get smaller. I don't know what Z. HO is 1/87th scale. Then S is 1/64. So your Hot Wheels, your Matchbox you see at your local stores and stuff. Or like Auto World, they do 1/86 scale. Not 86, 64 scale. But most of that. Then you have O scale, which is, I believe, 1/48, I believe. And it just gets larger and larger. So that's something you gotta think about. That's how much space you want to allocate. And something else you need to do if you're gonna run freight, if you're not doing a switching layout, you need to consider about the size. But if you're running smaller freight cars, you can have a tighter radius. If you're doing passengers, you're gonna need a larger radius. And with larger freight, like auto racks and stuff, they're gonna require larger radiuses. If you're doing switching, you just need to make sure your switches are large enough. And if you're gonna do diesel or steam, because most steam are large steam. Now you can have smaller steam; they'll fit in a smaller radius, but it's something you gotta consider. And that's gonna play back into budget. But something else you need in terms like how many sidings you want. Do you want to do a single track, double track, triple track, quadruple track, which in my opinion is probably overkill. Unless you're doing a main and you're separating from there. Where you're having multiple loops going to multiple different locations or switching wise. Stuff like that. Now, you do need to figure out like what kind of budget you have. Budget is very important because the larger the locomotive, the more expensive it gets. Now, depending on where you go, because there's not a huge difference between HO and N-scale, so that's just more a preference. But you do need to do your research. Go to do online searches and stuff, and I will cover in a brief summary of how to save money towards the end of this video. It's like something else you need to consider is if you have old track, if you're going to use this. If you have old brass track, you're going to do, can it work? Yeah. Is it recommended? Not really, because in HO wise, it's going to require a lot of maintenance to keep it running and operating. So that's something you got to keep in mind is maintenance and stuff. And you got to be able to maintain stuff. And like I said, you got to determine whether you want to do steam or freight trains. Because those will be very important because steam's probably going to cost you twice as much as a diesel of its size. Sorry to hear that, but it's the sad truth. And we highly recommend do your research because if you have old track, you need to make sure what code it is. And in HO, there's like 3 different codes. I do code E3, and that's just the track height itself. Oops, sorry. But something else you need to consider about is if you already know if you're gonna stick with this or not. If you already know out of the gate, I'm gonna stick with this. It just comes down to whether you want to have a pre-made track or not pre-made, but be able to hand lay or have pre-built straights or curves and stuff that will help because that does pay a toll. Because something else you need to consider like that is if you're not quite sure and you're going to do a starter kit, but you don't want to put a whole lot of money because you're not quite sure. Bachmann does a lot of cheaper starter sets, But I will say this, what you put into this hobby is what you're getting. So if you're paying like $130 for a starter kit, or two, and it has locomotive and cars, you're getting, I'm not bashing anyone, but what you pay for is what you're getting. So sometimes a deal can be too good for true, unless you do your research. Research is very, very important when it comes down to purchasing. Now, I will be right back and I'll show you when I come down to the track wide. Okay, I'm back. So, one of the things that you got to consider, now I'm going to use HO because I know there's 4 different, on the top of my head right now, starter sets, and you have Walthers, which I don't really know a whole lot about. It's kind of hit and miss, from my understanding. Then you have Lionel, and I hear they are coming back into this, which I think, in my opinion, is really good for the hobby itself because it gives competition. It makes other competitors more competitive and more wanting to put better quality product out. And I will say an H.O. Bachmann is the reigning king of starter sets because they don't change anything. Well, I wouldn't say that. But their track, how they do their track, Bachmann track hasn't changed in years. But it does have its flaws. As I said, sometimes, like here, this is just from, if you don't know if you're, one of the things I will say is, something you need to consider is if you already have a track plan in mind. If you're not going to be taking the stuff apart, back together, then Bachmann is way to go. Because you have the track and stuff. But if you're not quite sure, Kato. Kato does have a starter set, and I think they have a just under 300 starter set that comes with no locomotives. It's tight curves. But if you know you're sticking with this hobby, it is a better investment because the price between Kato and Bachmann there's hardly little to no difference. Now, I will say this. Bachmann has those starter sets. They're going to be cheaper. And they do have more accessories and stuff to it, which is fine. But the problem is the thing is kind of when you break these, this is what holds the track together. Because it literally, this is how it connects. It's like this. And these are what holds it in, along with these. And it's kind of hard to put a new one of these, and if you have to change them, you have the tendency to maybe pulling the whole rail off. It's the problem. Kato, I will say this. How they connect is also how they do the connectivities. Each track has its plus and minuses. I don't know much about Lionel track. I'm going to try to stay on topic as much as possible, but also cover the plus and minuses. And I said, do your research, look into reviews and stuff, but I take my track apart and stuff, and the benefit of Kato, if you've seen my other videos, I do talk about the fact that this is how they connect and stuff, but they also have replacement pieces. So let's say, unlike Bachmann, when you basically break this and this, you have to go buy a brand new piece of track. Kato, this rail and this rail doesn't, you literally have to break the track itself to have to replace it. For $11, you could get a bag full of replacement pieces for this. Or you just put drops in. That's how you power your track. And like Bachmann, you can, there are pieces of track that does allow it, and I just felt the piece of rail move. Yeah. But it's wear and tear. Something you got to consider. I've only seen one piece of track ever come back broken from Kato, and that's because somebody dropped a hammer on it. It was a a little kid that dropped a hammer on it. Now, Kato does have starter sets, but it's probably going to be about at least twice as much, 2 to 3 times more. And it does come with a loco, but their locos that they have for their starter set in HO is the P40 and P42s. Now, in scale, I would recommend just go with straight Kato, because Kato is a Japanese company that well, the owner of Kato, he wanted, from what my understanding is, he wanted N-Scale, but he couldn't get it in Japan. So he made his own company so he could have his own N-Scale. And what he wanted to do was also have American locomotives. So that's why you have a lot of, Kato has so many. And in N-Scale, if you're doing that, they have a lot of accessories and stuff. Bridges, and I really wish they'd do that. In HO, they do have accessories, and one of my favorite pieces is actually the adjustment track that I have a video on. But, yeah, that's something you have to consider, is whether you're going to, this is something that you plan on sticking to, because that can depend on, because I will say, if you're going with HO, just bite the bullet and get Kato. Even if you have to go to the store and buy individual pieces, it's saving yourself the painstaking heartache later on. Especially if you're taking the track apart and stuff a lot, because you probably spend more money on Bachmann replacing the track once you destroy it. I literally have a box full of these of Bachmann, and most of them are broken. And they don't really hold well when they break. The flanges pull, the track gets pulled, stuff breaks. So that's something you have to consider long run. It may be a larger upfront cost, but cheaper long run cost. So that's something you have to consider. But something you need to take another huge thing you need to consider about is children. Do you have them? And depending on how old they are, I'd probably go with a larger locomotive. And something like a diesel where it doesn't have as many details. But if they're super young, I would recommend, just have supervised stuff. And if the kid's really young, I would more recommend probably not let them really near it, unless you're holding them and watching them closely. Things tend to break, things fall apart, and the last thing you need is a choking hazard. And something you need to consider about is DC or DC. Do you know if you're going to go straight DCC or DC? And I do have a video about how to wire that and how easy it is and how I did it. And I do have a video about what's the difference between DC and DCC. So, if you already know that, then perfect. But if you don't, probably research into that. And something you need to probably consider is stick with a certain decoder brand or manufacturer, because that does play a key factor in stuff. Because I'll go in HO. A great example would be Athearn has soundtracks, which when you turn the locomotive on, it goes immediately. Now, those who have an ESU decoder, it depends on how it's set up, but like skill trains use ESU. Sorry for the sniffles. They have a startup sequence, and the locomotive does not go until the sequence has initiated, has gone through, and stuff. And if you're going, starting with DC, you want to go to DCC, a lot of certain manufacturers, I'm not going to name names, and there's a lot that do require you to use their stuff to operate it, or to be able to get all the features. Now, as I said, do your research, figure out what those brands are. I like using soundtracks because I could put whatever I want into the board and have all the lighting features without any complications. I don't have programming issues. So, how Soundtracks does their things is they have pre-made selection for the decoder itself. So it has all the sounds and stuff that you need, and you got to do a little bit of research what kind of engine you need. But other than that, it has pre-made sounds, and you can alternate between that. And it has bells, horns, all sorts of stuff. So it's basically a decoder with a bunch of sound files already installed, ready to go. And all you gotta do is select those sound files, that certain sound file for each thing. So you can literally have a very unique locomotive. And I don't know about how Digitrax does their stuff and the other decoders, but ESU, I know you can download the sounds. And you can have that, instead of a pre-made, you can actually have the actual sound of the locomotive right there. The horn, the bell, they're unique, but you have to download, which can cause headaches sometimes. And something else you gotta consider is if you have to you have to download sound files. Certain brands require certain things to download that. I spent $200 on blank decoders from a manufacturer, and I couldn't download the sound files because, well, they needed a certain piece because they had just changed everything to do that. And I just wanted to use that locomotive manufactured standard decoder, like their brand, to stick with the same brand. So, to download the sound files, but they wouldn't allow it because it didn't have the updated software or piece, is what they said you had, which would be like $200 I don't know how much it would have cost. But something else you can do is have your local train store do it if you find one. I highly recommend you doing that. If you can, when you go by, But yeah. So that's part of the reason why I like Soundtracks, because I don't have to download anything. It's already pre-made. I just got to select a certain type of decoder. And if you like a certain sound on the locomotive, you like a certain sound, like if you'd rather have an EMD and a GE, more power to you. I've had GE prime movers and an EMD by accident. Didn't really realize, and it is something important if you have people who are realistic. But the most important thing I would tell you is your layout. Things run how you want them to run. Now, you can be super realistic, or you can just have that's the benefit of this hobby. You can be as creative as you want. If you want to throw a steam sound into a diesel, more power to you all. But I would definitely, if you do that, record it or take it to I wouldn't say a hobby shop, but take it to maybe a railroad society. Take it to I wouldn't say a train show, but it's putting a steam in a diesel is a good way to mess with people's heads, or if you have somebody who's very prototypical, put a GE engine and an AMD, or vice versa, or an Alco, and throw at their heads. I literally did that this weekend I put a steam decoder and a switcher, and no one could figure out why they couldn't hear the diesel sound. Then it dawned on them, that's steam. It's like, yep, because that's all I had decoder-wise. But yeah. So you gotta take account is figure out what you want to do. Now, if you want to go with DC, then go to DCC. It's not that hard to change. I know I'm rambling on, but yeah. So one of the things you could do is go to if you have clubs, that was the word I was looking for. Clubs. Take that steam decoder and a diesel or whatever. Put on, if you could get permission and allowed to run a train at a club, do it. Mess with people's heads. It's a great way to irritate people or throw with them. I like messing with people's heads not like psychopath wise, but I like people like look at it, listen, walk past, do a double take. That's my kind of thing. It's like I like doing head scratchers. It's like, or do something that's subtle change. But just because this, if someone tells you, well, this locomotive had it, doesn't mean you have to. You can do whatever you want. That diesel has a Colorado whistle on it. Do I plan on changing it? Yeah. Do I plan on doing it anytime soon? Not really. It's about this hobby. It's having fun. And messing with someone a little bit is never a bad thing. As long as it's not, you're not physically messing with someone. Sometimes just throwing off their game and making people do a double take is always worth it. But as I said, DC or DCC. The benefit of DC is it's cheaper. But like with HO, it's about they're between a DC locomotive and a DCC is about $100. A sound decoder is starting out, at least with an Athearn Genesis, is like put a Tsunami 2. It's about $136. So I say if you do a deal, you could pay a little bit cheaper, but it goes both ways. So it's shop around, do your research. It's something, but I'm gonna cover how to save money really simply. So, a great way to save money is if you already have old rolling stock, figure out how to convert them. So it puts metal wheels, couplers, and I guarantee if you do all that stuff, because you can spend about $10 on 2 cars compared to having to pay all this money for a brand new car with couplers. But standardize your couplers is a very good thing to do. Look for deals. Shop. Shop around at hobby stores, preferably. Your best deals are going to be at those who that particularly do trains. So, the better place to do that would be at your mom and pop train stores, and your deals are going to be better sometimes, better than what you see online, because some old train stores, they don't change their price. Depending, if you find one of those stores, make that your particular place to go, because if they're willing to give you free, because you can, I'll get deeper into this later. I'll stick with the budget. So one of the things you can do is use old rolling stock. If you get someone who says, hey, I have a bunch of rolling stock I don't want, take it. And it has the old hook horn couplers. Some of that can be converted. Just do your research what you can do. Some are really, really, really easy. Now, one of the things I would say is change those plastic wheels, if they have them, to metal. Save yourself the headache. Now, if some of these cars have a power thing to them, you need to make sure that you have those wheels set right. Because the metal wheels will have an insulated side and have a side of the wheel on that, because it's all metal, I'll have a rubber piece that keeps it from causing a short across the board. That's something you got to keep in mind. There are some rail cars that do have sound to them, so that's something you got to keep in mind. You can, as I said, find a very reputable train store and do that. You can find good deals at swap meets and stuff, but you need to do your research. Train shows is a great way to figure out what's coming out. Go to the websites, figure out, do your research, because something to do. You got to keep in mind when it comes down to locomotives, because that's where you're going to put your money. I would tell you this right now. Most money is, you think locomotives is expensive, it's when you do scenery, because you can spend over $1,000 in just a 1 foot square piece. So you have to keep in mind. And you can find stuff at train shows for cheap, but I will tell you this, if it comes down to a locomotive, test it. Doesn't matter, just test it, because sometimes you can get a good deal if you know what's wrong with that locomotive ahead of time. Like it's a common issue, and you know how to fix it, more power to you. I literally watch, like, I know a guy that literally takes old Broadway steam locomotives and strips them, the smoke generator, the coder, the boards and everything, and puts a Blue Nami in it. And one of the things I would tell you this, because of that smoke generator, Broadways have very excellent pickup. And the one thing that you do when you put when you put something that doesn't require much power to, it's very, you'd be surprised when you put Keep Alive in that. So sometimes if you know how to fix it, you can save a lot more money. I mean, he does that, and he paid probably what half a price a brand new locomotive would be with a decoder replacement. Because all he did was replace the lights. So if you do your research, you can find a good deal. But one of the things is that exact same individual bought a locomotive, tested it, realized it had gearing problems, and gave it back to the dealer. And the guy said, "Oh, I didn't know I had the issue." I will tell you this, most dealers do know the issue, they just won't tell you. It's sad. But if you want to do, like, running multiple trains, I will say DCC. And finding a day if they have a sale on it is really good. Now, so, as I said, when you do your research and stuff, it depends. I know I'm kind of skipping back to the DCC, but if you already know that you're going DCC and you like a certain type of decoder, or if you're just wanting to run trains and stuff and you don't have a particular type, just go with the sound unit. Now, if you know you're in for the long haul and you know stuff changes, stuff goes bad. So if you already know how to hardwire stuff, not hardwire, but with newer locomotives, and you know there's a certain type of decoder, I'd probably say standard issue decoders in the long run. Do it. Go with a DC and put your price decoder in, because it's cheaper than buying the sound unit and then having to convert it over. But if you like doing consisting, the best thing to do is, if you pick the locomotives you want to consist together, and make sure that exact same brand and have the exact same board. So if you change the board in one of them, if they're not the same manufacturer at the very least, I don't know how well they'll run. If you have like a PNP 8 board with a motherboard with a 21 pin in it, I know, complicated, but the PNP 8 is a flat board, while it's a whole board replacement, the best way to describe it. While which is what most likely is in your sound units already, especially with Athearn Genesis, a PNP 8 board is what they described it as. While your DC locomotives today are going to be a 21 pin. So you gotta keep in mind. So I'm just gonna wrap things up real quick. Research is very, very important. So if you want me to cover more in depth, I know I rambled on, so what I'm gonna do is, I hope you enjoyed this. I hope this was useful. Hit the like button, share it, comment, tell me if you like this or not, tell me if I missed something, and I'll do a video on to cover that. But if you enjoyed it, hit the like button. If you want to stay connected, hit the bell icon and subscribe. Enjoy the rest of your day.